The reading this morning is from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 27. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I become like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I become like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I become weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Do you know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much, Letta. Do keep that passage open in front of you. And if you've got the service sheet, you can follow where we're going on page 9 here. It's great to see you. I feel it's been a while since I've seen a number of you. If we've not met, my name is David, and I'm the curate here. Let's pray. Loving Father, please open our eyes and ears to hear your voice speak to us now. Thank you that you change us through your word, by your Spirit. So we pray that you would do that in our lives today. Amen. As we start, I want you to imagine in your mind an evangelist. Okay, an evangelist, someone who speaks about Christ to people who don't know Christ, so that they would be won for Christ. What kind of person comes to mind? Perhaps you picture someone like Billy Graham in a big football stadium to tens of thousands of people. Maybe someone knocking on doors or out in the streets. Perhaps someone, maybe if you were to describe them, particularly dynamic or gifted. Maybe someone super holy and keen. A clergy. Someone young, someone who's read every book on evangelism that has ever been written. What kind of person does God call to be an evangelist? The Apostle Paul says, in our reading, you. We're in a series on church as life as God's gathered people. And it's been a chance over the last few weeks to come back to some of those fundamentals as we've begun meeting together. And our passage is about evangelism. And it shows us in these words that all followers of Christ are called to win people for Christ and to do everything and anything to make that happen. And it's all because all followers of Jesus are in a race. We're in a race. And we're going to think about this under 3 headings. You can follow on the handout. The first is this: the race. We're in it. The race. We're in it. This weekend, we had the start of the Tokyo Olympics. They finally started. Over 2 weeks of over 30 different sports and more than 11,000 athletes, all competing for the glory of gold. And it's amazing because it's a time when we get to see people push the limits of what is humanly possible in speed and endurance and skill. And actually, our readers knew about this world of athletics. We have the modern Olympic Games just down the road from Corinth in Olympia with the ancient Olympic Games. And the Corinthians even had, just round the corner, they had their local Isthmian Games. They knew the world of athletics, and Paul said to them, we're in a race. Have a look down with me at verse 24. Verse 24, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? So here's the command: run in such a way as to get the prize. Run. I wonder if you picked up the tone of this passage as we were reading it. The tone and feel. Do you not know? Do you not know, Christian? We're in a race. Now it's important for us at this point to understand what kind of a race are we in, the kind of race that Paul is talking about. Every athlete needs to know what kind of a race they're in, whether it's the 100 meters dash or a full marathon, whether it's the 5K fun run or the Olympic final, whether it's just a straight run to the end, or whether there's hurdles to jump on, or whether it's just me, or is there a team in the relay that I'm passing the baton to? What kind of a race is Paul talking about here? Well, this race, it's not a picture of generally working hard or even living godly and upright lives, as important as that is. Verse 22 shows us that this is a picture of winning people for Christ. Have a look down with me at verse 22. Paul describes himself: to the weak, I become weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all men. Why? So that by all possible means I might save some. It's a race to win people for Christ. We're in it. I wonder, as we read the beginning bit, this letter read to us, and we saw some of the radical things that the Apostle Paul does to win people for Jesus so they might be saved, how he becomes a slave to them. Have a look at verse 19. I'm free, though I'm free and belong to no man. I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. I wonder, as we heard that, those radical things that the Apostle Paul does to win people, we heaved a sigh of relief that it's Paul doing those things and not us. And we might think, if we're honest, when we see these kind of lifestyles, that this is a lifestyle just for the keen Christians or the clergy, while we live our lives, and lives very similar from our unbelieving friends. And so if that's us, God wants us to know, do you not know? We're in a race. All the runners run. So run. A number of us will know Chris and Roz House that we mentioned earlier, who are coming to us next week. There are mission partners in Uganda, in East Africa. And they've been there for a number of years now. And it's a place where they are in Uganda that saw a big movement of God in the 1920s and 30s. It was a big thing. It's called the East African revival. That's what people call it. And it was an amazing time when loads of people were coming to Christ all across the region, in Uganda and in Kenya and Rwanda as well. And many initially thought, as this thing was happening, this great movement of God, that it was because of the influence of the missionaries who were around preaching the gospel. Until they realized, as they looked closer, that it was actually the Ugandan converts themselves that were spreading the gospel, and this is how it was moving from village to village. I'm told it was the local Lugandan chorus that is translated to English, "We praise you, Jesus." That was what spread across the country, winning people who had not heard about Jesus to follow Christ, converts themselves. We're in a race. And that means one big thing, importantly for us, it means that evangelism for us is not an optional extra for the Christian. Speaking about Jesus to those who don't know him yet. It's not an optional extra for us. Perhaps if following Jesus is like a car, we might think that speaking about Christ is like that little optional cup holder that you can sometimes get, and you push it in and then it springs out. It's not like that at all. It's actually, we're thinking more one of the wheels spinning, not an optional extra. And you can see in verse 27 what is at stake here. Have a look down with me at verse 27. "I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified from the prize." It's Paul's concern for himself that he's not disqualified from the prize. It's Paul's concern for his readers as well, that they are not disqualified. You could read on in chapter 10, the warnings of God's people in the wilderness. And Paul says to us, don't be disqualified. Hear the warning. The starting gun has fired in this race. Are we running? Are we running now? Or do we feel, instead of that person who shoots off at the starting gun, we're stuck tying our laces or in the wrong lane going the wrong way? There can be different reasons for that could stop us. Perhaps it's fear. I'm sure all of us have felt that at some point. Fear of being rejected by our friends, or maybe fear of getting it wrong. Or perhaps we only feel that we want to speak about Christ when it feels natural. And so we find ourselves not shooting off in the race, but quietly jogging along. Perhaps we're in the situation where actually we're praying for opportunities to speak about Christ, but not aware that actually there are lots of opportunities around us. We think of the people that we know, that God has put in our lives, searching for answers, wondering what life is about. We think of the opportunity that the online world of social media, that gives us, that broadcasting platform that we have, that other generations have not known. Particularly when there's that opportunity to share services, because they're just on the YouTube link and we can just send it off to a friend. Have you seen this? And also we think about all the resources that we have. We were just thinking about some of them at the men's group a number of weeks ago. The resources that you can read the Bible one-to-one with people, and you've just got this book and you just read it, and that people get to see Jesus. Or perhaps another thing stops us. We're keen to help people and we're keen to serve Jesus, but we only serve their physical needs and not their spiritual needs, which are the most important. Our biggest need, right through Scripture, it's to be reconciled to God. That is the need of all of us, our biggest and greatest need. And so we might find ourselves admiring the work of the food bank but not those who speak about Christ. We're in a race. Or perhaps, and this one is even more subtle, we might think we're in the race and we might feel that we're speaking about Christ, but it feels very gentle and very shallow. As we'll see in our next heading, this work of winning people for Jesus, it is perhaps one way of calling it, it's a deep work. We're not talking like a 2-minute Radio 4 thought for the day, or casually mentioning we'll go to church. It's a deep work. And so let us present the gospel in its fullness, grace, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, sin, judgment, response, and back it up with our lives, and in expectation that God works through his word and changes lives. It's a race. Perhaps we're thinking right now, yes, I'd like to be running. I am running. But what does that look like? How do I do that practically? What are we actually talking about here, day to day? And that brings us to our second heading. The rules. Do everything to win people. The rules. Do everything to win people. It's fair to say that we are in an age that values rights over responsibilities. That's the air that we breathe, the water that we're swimming through. We value rights and fighting for our rights over our responsibilities. And we can often see the negative impact around that in our world when we see groups fighting amongst each other, fighting for our own corner. And it was a problem in our day. It was also a problem in Paul's day as he was writing this. It was a big problem in the church. There were Christians fighting for their own rights. Paul shows them a very different way. He shows that evangelism is actually the beautiful opposite. It cuts against this attitude that we can have of fighting our own corner and fighting for our rights. Because here's the thing, winning people for Christ is about losing our rights. Winning people for Christ is about losing our rights. If you don't believe me, have a look at verse 19. Paul says, "Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible." He makes himself a slave to win as many people as possible. Sometimes I talk to people in Sussex and they talk about how they're writing a book. I wonder if I wrote a book on evangelism and I said, evangelism is like choosing to be a slave. I wonder if I'd get many copies sold. I don't think so. But that is the language that Paul uses here. And it's so countercultural. And verse 20 shows us exactly what that meant in practice. It meant that Paul was willing to identify with people and make sacrifices to do that. So have a look at verse 20. He gives us an example. "To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law." So here is Paul in Christ. He's not under the Jewish law anymore. But he puts himself under those regulations to win the Jewish people for Christ. The regulations like the food regulations that they would have had about eating and the festivals as well that they had during the months and days. So that's what Paul would do when he was trying to win the Jewish people. But what about when he was reaching the Gentiles, the nations, us, the non-Jews? Have a look at verse 21. "To those not having the law," that's that's everyone else, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. So here is Paul. It's like in some ways he's commanding, be a chameleon. Be a chameleon. Often we use that phrase, all things to all men, in a bit of a negative way, don't we? It slightly means that they're slightly a bit soft and sometimes they're a bit, compromising. But actually, Paul says, I'm a chameleon. I come to people and I want to take away every obstacle to the gospel. I want to identify with them. And you think how shocking that would have been for the Apostle Paul. He had grown up for many years a Jewish man, and he would have grown up, and he really went for it. He was a Benjamite, and he was circumcised on the 8th day. And now he's willing to identify with those Gentiles to win them for Christ. That's how far he's willing to go. It's scandalous. And you can read in the book of Acts how actually a number of the apostles struggled to get their heads around that until they realized it was God's will and that God was now going to the nations and not just to the Jewish people. Now, at this point, we have to put in a few boundaries here just so we don't go completely off track. Have a look at verse 21. I'm always impressed by how nuanced Paul is here. He's often so nuanced, we sometimes don't give him credit for it. Have a look at verse 21. You see the brackets in verse 21? I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. So Paul is willing to go far to be able to reach people, but he's not going so far as to sin. He says, I'm under the law of Christ. I'm not going to sin. Just as the Lord Jesus was someone who ate with sinners, but did not sin himself. He's under the law of Christ. And he's crossing boundaries, and eyebrows are raised. The other boundary that we need to put in here is sometimes people take this passage and they say that Paul changed his message to make it more acceptable. And sometimes they look at this passage and say, well, we probably shouldn't talk about sin and judgment now because that's a bit of a barrier and people won't like it. Now, we need to put in a boundary here because we need to remember chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians. Chapter 1, Paul tells us that he preaches the cross to everyone, even though it's a stumbling block to Jews and it's foolishness to Gentiles. He keeps preaching that message of the cross, even though it is offensive and confusing to people. So, with those boundaries in mind, what does it look like to win people for Christ? Identifying with people to win them. Identifying people to win them. And he's calling us, Paul, the Apostle Paul, to do the same. Run the race. Run the race. I think of someone I knew that wasn't following Christ, but he was really into photographing birds of prey. That was his hobby. And he spent a lot of time doing that. And his Christian auntie really wanted him to come to Christ. So she knew a Christian in her church, and he knew a little bit about cameras. And so she said, well, would you go out with my nephew and spend time with him? So they went, and they took photos together. And after a while, the Christian guy said, should we have a look at the Bible together? And so they looked through a course, a bit like Christianity Explored that we do here. And he came to Jesus. Or I think of a couple who used to have people round for lunch, and as you were sitting on the lunch table, they'd ask you questions. And many people really like talking about themselves, so it worked very well. And they'd ask you lots of questions, and then they'd say, do you have a faith? Do you have a faith? And then they would share Christ, just there, at the dinner table. And so many people's lives changed there. And then they'd pray about a next step for that person. It's sacrificial work, taking an interest in other people, particularly over the long run. Over the long run. It's just that. And it can be especially hard, perhaps, if we find other people's interests and their lives, maybe just put it blunt, we find their interests a bit dull and a bit boring. Do they really like Southeast Asian history? Oh, so dull. Maybe we find them too Brexity or too woke. Question for us: how far are we willing to go to win people? How far are we going? How far? Could it be inviting someone to church or Christianity Explored in the autumn? Could it be on Sundays, not only speaking to our mates, but intentionally speaking to people who are new and guests? Could it be crossing the pain barrier to read the Bible with a colleague or friend from the club? Or inviting friends to a barbecue at our house when someone speaks about Christ there? How far are we going? The starting gun has fired. Are we running? And it's at this point we need to think about motivations. Because motivations really matter, don't they? Especially when we're involved as something as sacrificial as this. And when often we don't see results this side of eternity, what is going to get us out of the morning, get us out of bed each day to do this? That brings us to our third heading, the resurrection prize. Go for it. The resurrection prize. Go for it. There is a prize. Think back to the runners again. There is a big difference between the Olympic final race and when we're doing like a village fun run. When you're at the fun run, it's about the exercise and being there, and if we finish, that's brilliant. But the Olympic final, we're playing to win. And how you do those two races are very different. Have a look at verse 24. Shows us what kind of race you and I are engaged in. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. This is a race to win. Now, don't misunderstand Paul. He's not saying that we're all fighting against each other and elbowing one another out the way to beat each other. He's not saying that. But he is saying we are racing to win in this prize. That is the kind of way we are running. We are running hard because we want to win. Now, if one wins the big Olympic races this summer, there is fame and there is fortune to be had. I think of Usain Bolt, the former Olympic sprinter, and at his peak, I'm told that he was earning 30 million a year. 30 million a year. And you might think, that is stupid money to be earning. Not only did he get gold on multiple occasions, 30 million a year from all the advertising and deals. And we might think, yes, that's stupid money, but actually, followers of Jesus are running for something even more valuable. Amazingly, God is not finding our desires too strong. God finds our desires too weak. We're running for a prize. Do we want it? Have a look at verse 25. It shows us what kind of a prize we're running for. Verse 25. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. A crown that lasts forever. That is a really important word, forever. Paul uses it only one other time in this letter. He uses it just one other time, and it's in chapter 15 when he's talking about the resurrection, about Resurrection Day, when Jesus will raise all followers to be with him. It's a famous verse. I'll read it to you. You may have heard it before. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable. It's the same word. And we shall be changed. That is what we are running towards, to be raised with Christ. What motivates the follower of Jesus to run? It's that reality that Jesus on the third day rose again as the beginning of resurrection life. Resurrection life that all of us in Jesus can share in. What motivates the follower of Christ to run? It's the fact that though by nature we reject God and that we deserve punishment, God, out of love for us, took the initiative to come and save us. He sent his Son to serve us as a slave for us, dying the death of a slave, to die for our sin. And the Son who rose so that we can be raised with him. This resurrection life, it never perishes. It never loses its brilliant quality. It's always great, forever. Life with God, forever. While medals rust and athletes are forgotten, the resurrection life lasts forever. It's because Jesus has defeated death. That great enemy, the shadow of death that has been following us so much this year. Greatest enemy, defeated and slain at the resurrection of Jesus. So we run. And we run hard in response to that reality of the resurrection for that great prize. And it's that great prize that actually we are holding out to people who don't know Jesus. That is what we are holding out. There is nothing more precious that I could offer you than the resurrection life for those who trust in Jesus. And so, what is our motivation to run this race, to win people for Jesus who don't know him? So, what is our motivation when we're feeling afraid and discouraged? It's that resurrection perspective. It's the resurrection perspective that takes us above the here and now onto the things that really matter. So let us run. Let us run hard and not be disqualified. So as we close, let me take you back to that picture we had of the evangelist. Have you got him or her just in your mind now? We often think that being an evangelism, we often think it's about charisma or technique or gifting or having the perfect resources. But actually, it's not about that at all. It's about, as we've seen, about eyeing the resurrection, about sacrifice, about intentionality with people. It's about understanding that we're all in a race. Now, I'm aware that when it comes to this, it is much easier to talk about it than to do it. I'm very conscious of that as I stand here. So I'm very grateful for your prayers. Just having written to a guy to read the Bible with me, and for your prayers for sharing some of the things that we put out on YouTube. And I was encouraged recently, a couple of my friends took me up on the offer and watched the service. And as I've started inviting people for the Christmas services, I'm very grateful for your prayers. The starting gun has fired. Are we running? Let's pray. Run in such a way as to get the prize. Father God, we thank you for the resurrection. Thank you that you took the initiative to save us. Help us to run in response to that reality. And Father, you know that we find these things hard. You know that we feel that pain barrier that we have to go through. Please help us to run. Father, please help us to run hard. Amen.